policy.
Now, you also talk about health care on your website. This has been addressed at the federal level in the last year. Talk about some of your plans at the state level.
Sure. I have a lot of background in healthcare. Most of my marketing career was with healthcare organizations. So I have a good insight not merely into some of the bigger companies and their processes, but how physicians and nurses and healthcare professionals have to deal with some of the changes that have been brought on not only by the healthcare bill, but more generally some of the negative implications of how insurance companies, with their profit motives, have an effect on the entire healthcare process. I think that the best way to respond is that I don't think we're done with reforming healthcare in this country. In Connecticut, there was an opportunity for small businesses to become part of the government's plan to buy health insurance, and I know that the governor was initially against that. I still think that's an opportunity for us. I think that we have to make health care affordable for companies and for individuals, and that's going to require far more significant reform than anything we put on the table to this point. Health care can be related to profit-making companies, but they're talking about life and death and quality of life. We need to find ways to assure that, to help people stay healthy rather than have to pay for the high expenses when they get really sick, rather than the way that we're doing things right now. That's going to require, in my view, fairly radical changes to the way we deliver health care and pay for health care in this country. And we will have to consider things that have, unfortunately, due to misleading information, have gotten a bad name, including a single-payer system whereby everybody is entitled only to prophylactic preventive care. Everybody's required to have some form of catastrophic care insurance. And then people have to make choices as to how much they're willing to pay for premiums for whether they want to get the latest in diagnostic or technological or pharmaceutical products or whether they're going to have to wait in line. That's going to be personal choice.
Now, transportation problems exist in Westport and around the state, whether it's with gas prices, whether it's this morning getting to Staples and now paving the roads, so there's all the backup in traffic. So talk a little bit about some of your plans for transportation.
Obviously, anybody who's got a pulse and who lives in Fairfield County realizes we've had serious problems that date back decades at this point. Metro North, we're going to get some new rail cars, but I don't think that begins to solve some of the problems we have with Metro North. I-95, as I mentioned previously, is a thoroughfare for trucks and cars going from here to other places in New England. We have not resolved those problems well. Yes, it was nice to get some of that federal stimulus money to deal with some of our crumbling roads and bridges, but it only really was the tip of the iceberg. We still need billions more in order just to bring our transportation system up into the modern age and make it safe. If elected, I intend to be part of the Transportation Committee. I believe strongly that the only way that Fairfield County's transportation needs get addressed is if all the representatives from Fairfield County band together as a coalition and try to apply some leverage up in Hartford. I know that there are exciting plans to build a new rail line from New Haven to Springfield. That sounds great in Hartford, and I'm sure it'll bring jobs to part of that corridor. But we still haven't addressed Fairfield County's transportation needs, and I think that should be the priority. We should be looking at alternative mass transit options, improving our bus service, and making it worth people's while to take mass transit as opposed to taking their car. We have a lot of work to do on the transportation side.
Now, one thing that mass transit helps with is the energy and the green environment, which is something you mentioned before and I know is important to you. So talk a little bit more about, you talked about green jobs before, just talk a little bit more about that.
I'd start by saying that I'm very proud to be a Westporter because we are really a model to the rest of the state in terms of environmental sensitivity and responsibility. And I'm proud to have been associated or involved with a number of water quality and environmental initiatives. I think because of our leadership role, we can demonstrate to others how we can work collaboratively to solve some of our environmental problems. I think a lot of our environmental issues are not specific to an individual town or municipality. They have a lot to do with regional issues because rivers cut across borders. I think we need to work collaboratively with other communities to solve some of our problems. It's a matter not so much of having more regulation, but giving the Department of Environmental Protection, which is really underfunded, the resources it needs to enforce the regulations on the book for all of our benefit. And I think that, to your point, we can be a leader in environmental and green jobs and energy jobs to a degree that we are not only benefiting the job market in the state, we're also making our state a much more attractive place to do business and to live.
Now, not only you, but everyone running for office this year, whether in Connecticut or anywhere, wants to get things passed and get things done. How can we get any of it passed, though, if we have no money?
It's a very interesting point. There are always ways to get things done with very little money. We've seen this in Westport. I've been on the RTM now for 7 years. I'm working on initiatives like revitalizing downtown. We don't have the resources to get it done, but we've focused on public-private partnerships. There are opportunities to outsource some of our activities and services that can be better delivered by private organizations or not-for-profits that have a lot of expertise in this area. And it's a wonderful time to plan. When you don't have money, you have to think of efficient ways to deliver things that are important to us. So I think this is an opportune time for us to really buckle down and understand how we can do things better and differently. I've demonstrated that in Westport. I've worked really hard to see if we can find ways to improve Westport, even during this economic downturn. And I think we've demonstrated that here, and I think I've got the skills and the consensus building experience to go up to Hartford and do the same thing.
Now, I want to ask you this question, and that is, obviously Westport's a very affluent town, and there are a lot of towns in Connecticut that aren't. Take, for example, Bridgeport. Now, let's say something happens where there's a bill that might help the state in general, but it may hurt Westport a little bit. So basically the question is, how do you look at something like that? Where do your last resort, who do you defend, basically?
Well, if elected, I will be representing Westport, and Westport always comes first. But I believe that Westporters are very civically minded, and they are prepared to help others who are less fortunate. And I think that it's a matter of finding common ground where we think that we are not only benefiting the state, but we are not certainly hurting the citizens of Westport. I think that it will be possible to accomplish that. Certainly something that will benefit the state at the expense of Westport is something that I would be very resistant to, but I don't think those circumstances will come about that often.
All right, one question I asked everyone 2 years ago in the election cycle is that many young people have a negative view on government, and what would you tell these people in order to change their minds? So give me your thoughts on that.
I think that's unfortunate. I think it's reflective of the environment that's been created over the past number of years where people only listen to information, radio stations or cable TV stations that reinforce their previously held views. And belief systems are very hard things to change. And it disappoints me that young people are becoming so disillusioned and jaded so early before they've had a chance. And I'm very proud to have been part of the League of Women Voters effort to educate students at the 7th grade and at the 11th grade level about government and civics. I'm a social studies teacher, so it's something that is very close to my heart. I come closest to being a patriot, even though I don't use that word very often, when I talk about participation in government and recognition that we need government, that there are those who would have you believe the government is inherently bad and that we should restrict it and constrain it and starve it. I think that we can make it more efficient, but I also believe that we all need government. And I hope that this generation will become involved in a grassroots way, such as my generation did, because there are a lot of gratifying aspects of being involved in bringing about change, which is hard and maybe you can just accomplish incrementally. But I think that it informs the idealism of my generation, and I'd hope we'd be able to instill that in your generation as well, so that you'll become part of the process and contribute to solutions rather than become disillusioned to the point where you don't participate.